If a property owner or developer doesn't like their assessed value and the taxes they have to pay as a result, they can appeal to the assessor. If they don't like the answer there, they can appeal to the Cook County Board of Appeals. If they still don't like their tax rate, they can bring their case to another body, the State Property Tax Appeal Board, which recently awarded a $1 million tax break to Trump Tower. Our next guests argue that the system is grossly out of date and should be changed. And they are Cook County Assessor Fritz Kaegi and Barbara Flynn Currie, a former state legislator who served as Illinois House Majority Leader from 1997 to 2019. Welcome both of you back to Chicago tonight.
Thank you, Paris. It's good to be with you.
So you both, great to have you. You both jointly wrote this op-ed criticizing that last part of the formula here, this obscure board, the Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board. Fritz Kaegi, what's wrong with this body?
Well, I think when we're looking at questions of equity, I think this assumption that we used to make that more appeals makes for more fairness has to come into question, because by the time you have this fourth level of appeals, this fourth venue, which is the State Property Tax Appeals Board, all that's left are big property owners, and they're basically whittling down their share. And by then, it's making the system more inequitable. You have big property owners whittling down their share, like Trump Tower. It pushes more of the burden onto others, and it drains cash out of the taxing districts, and it's really resulting in more unfairness rather than more fairness.
And when Trump Tower gets that tax break, that's $1 million that other taxpayers have to absorb in Cook County. Barbara Flynn Currie, you mentioned in this op-ed that the Illinois General Assembly passed the law creating this board in the mid-90s. How and why did this come to be?
Well, in the first place, property tax lawyers have always wanted yet one more bite at the apple, and you can certainly understand that, Paris. And they have a real presence in Springfield. This legislation passed during the time that the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. And there had been earlier attempts to do just this. And I think that the Republican Party in the House and in the Senate, and certainly at the governor's office, was more than prepared to go along with the property tax lawyers. So I spoke against it. I thought it was not a good policy then. I think it is not good policy now. Tom Hines, who was then the Cook County Assessor, spoke out against it, as well as Jim Houlihan, his successor. So there were people who complained about the policy from the very beginning, but to complain doesn't mean you win.
And I should mention, though, a couple notable property tax appeal lawyers over the years, Ed Burke, Mike Madigan, Fritz Kaegi. They make their money representing these big commercial interests, the high-rises in the Loop. But anyone can utilize this system. So the kind of argument is it does provide due process for Joe or Jane, property owner who want to lower their taxes. What about that argument?
Well, the appeals process is definitely important for addressing errors, for providing fairness for all property owners, and you have multiple bites, chances to do this. You can do this at the assessor's office. You can do it at the board of review. Many people do it every year there, but when you add even more iterations to that, this is a classic example of systemic inequity when the only people who are left by that time are really the biggest property owners, who many studies have shown are probably already being underassessed. And what you're doing is you're having a system that's catering to the biggest and wealthiest property owners, who can provide all manner of excuses. And there's, as Barbara mentioned, there's a whole industry that exists purely to provide these excuses. And then you have a venue that may accept them, and there's really no downside for them trying it. So what you get in the end is whittling down the share of the wealthiest owners, and it puts more burden automatically onto everyone else. And it has this double whammy effect, because school boards and taxing bodies actually have to write checks to make up the difference. It's cash out of their doors, and it's grown at a 20% rate since 2003, when Barbara first tried to pass the bill that would take PTAB away from Cook County. And it's going to become, it's really a fiscal ticking time bomb for all of these taxing bodies who are very strapped.
Barbara Flynn Currie, address that. What is this costing Cook County taxpayers?
Well, I think it's costing a lot, and let me just say that there's a huge backlog at PTAB. There was before Cook County came under the rubric of being able to appeal to the PTAB. But even then, there were long delays. But once you add Cook County, there were more properties in Cook County than there were in all the rest of the state together. So it's no surprise that there's a terrible backlog. And I don't know what the answer is, except to say maybe we should rethink. Maybe Cook County shouldn't be part of this appeal. Maybe what we should do is say that this appeal opportunity is available to homeowners, to small businesses, but not to big industrial and commercial properties. Or maybe we should say, let's beef up the kind of procedures at the local level so that people have confidence and they're pretty convinced that the answers that they get from that appeal are accurate. The state doesn't do a good job funding the Property Tax Appeals Board, and it's not a surprise. The state has nothing to gain from the decisions that PTAB makes.
And so what you're saying with this delay and backlog, that means there could be cases from 10 years ago where they give $1 million tax break to somebody, and that means the county and the taxing bodies have to find the cash somehow and make up the difference. Fritz, Kaegi, when there are different assessed values from these appeals board, either PTAB or Cook County Board of Appeals, versus what your office puts out, what accounts for that discrepancy?
Well, there are different people who can have different opinions about valuation. We're all ostensibly trying to be a mirror to the market in our assessment system. It's supposed to replicate the market prices out there. But there are people who can construct arguments to say that, you should really compare my property to this other property. And sometimes you don't have quite enough data to establish what is the market. And there is a whole industry out there which is basically exists to convince you that a double cheeseburger is really a salad. And if you have enough iterations of that, you can find the biggest properties whittling themselves well down to below what they paid for the property, what other properties are transacting like it. But these are arguments about valuation, and under the law, it's supposed to be a mirror to the market. But the more that mirror gets distorted by different processes, by different systemic inequities, the more you find the distortion favoring the folks with the most resources, the biggest properties, and everyone else.
Fritz, while I have you here, the assessed values come out for most of Chicago this year. You have big commercial properties, big property developers that are worried that, you've promised to upend the system, which multiple reports found has been inequitable for many years, but they're worried that's going to mean massive tax hikes for them that could stifle their business and the economy. What's your response to that?
Well, they made predictions like this for the last 2 years when we were realigning assessments there. And yet we find that there's record activity, record investments, record prices being paid for all sorts of different kinds of assets in Chicago. I just think those predictions of doom are not coming to be. And in the meantime, realignment of the system is shown to be necessary. When there was a study done by the gold standard in our field, the International Association of Assessing Officers, they found the commercial properties that were purchased in 2018 were 50% underassessed. That means there's a huge amount of wealth transfer taking place. For an average homeowner in Cook County or Chicago, it might be more than $1,000 per year, affecting their home value by more than $10,000. And that is an incredible blow to the wealth, intergenerational wealth, to people's incomes, and it needs to be repaired. So we're not upending the system. We're fixing it and realigning it to where it should have been. It really got off track. And we're trying to make it accountable by mirroring the market and following the market as it always should have been done.
All right, well, we'll follow those assessments when they come out. And our thanks to Fritz Kaegi and Barbara Flynn Currie. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.